Welcome to Maverick University, an educational series featuring ministry modules taught by ministry-minded Christians and designed to help Christians become more effective in their service for Christ. Welcome to another edition of Maverick University. I'm your host, David Hallberg. With me today is a special guest, Brother Sergio Gonzalez. Brother Sergio is a church member at Northwest Bible Baptist Church in Elgin and is one of our bus captains and bus workers in our bus ministry. And today we'll be doing several segments on the bus ministry and his history with the bus ministry and how he continues to work in that ministry today. So thanks for joining us, Brother Sergio.
Thank you, Brother Hallberg.
And we're first going to talk about your history with the bus ministry. One of the first things that I got to know about you when I first met you was this history you have with the bus ministry, having grown up riding a bus as a kid. And so we're just going to basically go through your testimony, talk about what your family life was like, how you were reached by the bus ministry, and how it influenced you through maybe some crucial moments of your life. So let's start with the first things first. Where did you grow up, and what was your home life like?
Well, I grew up in Pilsen in Chicago, Illinois, which back then in the 1970s and 80s was like a real gang-infested neighborhood. And I have five siblings, two brothers and three sisters. And I grew up in Pilsen, and like I said, there was a lot of gangs in that neighborhood. And 1979, which is a long time ago, it shows my age. 1979, I had somebody knocked on our door, and was a bus worker from First Baptist Church in Hammond, Indiana. And he knocked on our door, and keep in mind, it's a gang-infested neighborhood. And these guys were Caucasian, and this is all Spanish neighborhood. And they were not afraid. They had something to share. They had the gospel to share. And they came and knocked on our door, and here's two Caucasian guys and all Spanish family. He knocked on. He tried his best to explain to us church tomorrow. And the first thing my dad said, how much? How much does it cost? How much money? And they're like, oh, no, it's free. He's like, oh, okay. He's like, okay, So he sent my two sisters and me and my brother Juan, who's a member of Northwest as well. And we started going to church, and they kept every single Saturday and Sunday come visit us, whether it rained and snowed. And if anybody's been through a snowfall in Chicago, it's not like in the suburbs. I mean, you have the cars parked real close to each other, and when you get 3 feet of snow, it's just terrible. But they did it. Every single week they came by and they visited us. And eventually the whole family started riding the bus. And then eventually my mom and dad started driving into church all the way to First Baptist in Hammond, Indiana, from Chicago to Hammond, which is like a 45 minutes to an hour drive. And they started coming to church there, and the rest is history. We've been here ever since, and riding buses.
That's pretty awesome. So you've got two guys who don't speak any Spanish going into a Hispanic neighborhood. Probably every door that they knocked was the same experience where they have to mumble through whatever Spanish they know, and whoever's talking to them has to mumble through whatever English they know just to make a conversation happen.
Well, one thing that admired me is that culture had nothing to do with it. They had a message. They had the gospel. They wanted to share it to as many people as they want. So culture had nothing to do with it. They just had something to share to people. And I think that's one thing I learned from that is that they didn't care where it was at. And like I said, it was a gang-infested neighborhood. A lot of people were afraid to go into that neighborhood because there was a lot of gangs in every other block. And they did it. They did it every Saturday and Sunday. And not only that, the gangbangers and the people in the neighborhood respected them. They would call them the church folks, the church people. And in Spanish, they called it iglesia. And they would say the brothers, the hermanos. They used to call them that. And they had so much respect because it was a church bus. They weren't there for trouble or anything. But that's one thing I admire from them. They didn't care where it was. They just went in there to give the gospel and bring people to church.
So what was your reaction to these two guys coming to your house, wanting you to ride the bus to church? Did you go to church? Were you a church-going family before that or no?
Yes, we were Catholic. We were strong Catholic. Actually, we were a strong Catholic. We went to St. Procopius in the neighborhood. It was a strong Catholic church. My dad was actually studying to be a priest when he was young.
Oh, really? I didn't
so
know
we
that.
had strong Catholic roots in our family. So
what would possess your dad to let his kids ride a bus to a Baptist church?
Well, now that I look back at it, I think it was God's intervention there. I think God made all this happen because you know what? If you meet my dad, he's very, how would I say, he's very hard sometimes. And for him to just say, you could take all 4 of my kids was kind of, shocking.
Yeah.
But he did. He let us all go. And eventually my dad told me that he felt bad. He's like, he told my mom, he's like, what kind of church is this? I don't even know if these people are devil worshipers or anything. I got to check it out. He kept asking. It's like, what we send him every week, and we don't even know nothing about it. So finally he went. And so he went to church, and first he said, that preacher just yelling and screaming so much, which is conviction.
Yeah.
He was screaming, like, I don't like that, man. I just can't stand him. But he kept going. He kept going, and he got saved, and he started going soul winning with one of our bus captains, Luis Ramos. He's got a church in Mexico now. Luis Ramos is one of the first men from the church, from First Baptist, that actually took my dad out soul winning in the neighborhood.
Oh, that's pretty awesome.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty cool.
So, what was little Sergio's first ride to church like?
Oh.
So, I mean, as bus workers, I remember, making sure and having, fear and dread that, man, this kid who's riding the bus for the first time, I want him to have a good experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I want him to, because next week I want him to ride the bus again.
Right.
And so, what was your first experience like?
Well, it was, to me, it was kind of scared. I was scared and excited at the same time, because they made me feel welcome, and the songs they were singing and how goofy they were, and how you could show that they actually cared. And, there's a lot of people do it for the wrong reasons, but you could actually tell they cared. They cared. They knew our names. They actually would talk to us. How are you? And and we learned the first thing we learned was a lot of songs, the church songs.
Yeah.
We learned that right away, and being Spanish, we learned a lot of our English in the church bus and in school, but mostly a lot of the church bus as well. Which is what better way than the Bible in English?
Absolutely.
King James Bible.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I always think is so crucial. Obviously, I'm involved in music ministry, and it plays an important part of my life. I think it plays an important role of everybody's life in the Christian culture.
Mm-hmm.
These kids are indoctrinated in school.
Right.
They may have a bad home life, but one thing they carry with them, they may not remember the sermon necessarily,
Right.
but they remember the songs, and they'll sing them at home.
Oh, yes, yeah. We came home and started singing those songs. We learned "Old Soldier," and we learned a lot of crazy songs, but it was great. But, the ride from Chicago to Indiana, you got to go through Dan Ryan, and that's a long ride. Mm-hmm. And as a bus captain now, I kind of feel a little bad, because, they had to have a program from Chicago. That's an hour long. Imagine having a program. But they did it. I remember they did it.
They kept you entertained.
And they kept entertained. But they had a program. They preached to us. They sang songs. They talked to us. So they actually had a program. And that's one thing that actually drew us close to them. We wanted to know more about them. Especially Peter Duke and Dan Kagan were my first bus captain and bus worker. They just, they were interested. So we just kept going.
So let's fast forward a little bit and talk about maybe some crucial moments in your life. Obviously, every kid has those moments where they have the opportunity to turn, to go another direction.
Oh, yes.
Maybe it's situational based, where maybe you might have been offended by somebody or something was done in not the right fashion, and you may have been justified to be offended, but maybe it was, maybe just a particular time of life, going from elementary to junior high or junior high to high school. Those are transitional years. Did you have any issues along the way?
Oh, definitely. I got saved when I was 6 years old at First Baptist Church, and when I was a teenager, 13, 14, 15, I reassured my salvation at camp, camps are very important, because, that's where I reassured my salvation. But then when you start getting into the 18, 19 years old, you want to become your own man, and, and do your own thing and make some money. And little by little, the devil started taking me away from church. And for like 2-3 months, I just stopped going. I started working on Sundays and doing my own thing. And then for some odd reason, the bus, every Sunday morning, I would get on the bus and go to work in Chicago, but I always see the bus driving by me, the yellow bus, just go by me. And automatically in my mind, I was like, man, I have to be in church. I have to be in church. What am I doing going to work? I have to be in church. Yeah. But for a while there, the devil grabbed me and just kept me away from church until finally I just said, I need to go back to church. And, it's the influences of your friends and your neighborhood and everything else. They started saying, don't go to church. Why do you need to make some money? My boss, it's time and a half. You work on Sundays.
Yeah.
And that took me away for a while, for a few months.
Was it somebody that reached out to you to get you back in church, or was it just the Holy Spirit and
No,
conviction
actually,
led you back in?
You know, it's funny. It's always a bus worker that you don't know. You know, the bus worker, you know, here, my first bus had left. It's been a time of 12, 14 years. So there's new bus workers and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Then there was a different bus worker who knocked on my door again, and I opened the door, and I didn't know who he was, but I knew who he was, the way he was dressed, the way he was tied his shoe. I know where he was from. And before he said what his name was, I'm like, I know where you're from. You're from First Baptist Church? He's like, yeah. He's like, oh. He's like, yeah, I told him, yeah, I need to go back to church. And I'm like, okay. So he came and picked me up on the bus as a teenager. So I started going. Then I married my wife, and we got married, and we drove all the way to First Baptist Church. We drove, but I wanted to get on the bus. So I would tell my wife, like, honey, you do what you want. It kind of sounds cold, but I told her, you do what you want, but I'm going to get on the bus. So I'll give her the keys to the car, and I'll jump on the bus and ride the bus to
So
church.
here you are, a young married man, and you decide you're not even involved in the bus ministry per se, but you just love the atmosphere.
Just
you
love being around the bus ministry and everything. And like I said, there's different workers, but it's always some worker that knocks on my door. Whether I move in different houses, there's always one worker that knocks on my door, and I know where they're from.
Well, I just picked up on a couple things that you've said. One was the fact that you would see the bus on Sunday morning, and then you didn't even know the bus worker that one time that knocked on your door to get you back in church. You just saw the way he was dressed.
Yes.
I think it's a lot of visual stimulation for our community
You're right.
to see our church buses go around our neighborhoods, go down the highways, and I imagine it brings a lot of conviction to people who grew up with mom or dad or grandma taking them to church, and they've turned their back on that and they're going a different direction, and in some cases they feel they could never go back, but maybe they see that bus and reminds them, that's where I should be this morning.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I would see it, and like someone's pressing on you. You feel like someone's pressing on you, and then you're like, it's a strong conviction. It's like, I got to be in church. I have to be in. Or you feel bad the whole entire day, Sunday, because you know that you were raised in the bus ministry. You need to be in church. You need to be in. For me, I had to be on the bus. I just had to be on. It's part. If you grew up there all your life on a bus, you kind of miss it. When I'm on vacation, I have to find a church that has a bus ministry. I just have to.
Yeah.
I have to do it and try to help out as much as I can, because it's something that you were raised, and for them to take it away from you, it's like they take a part of you away from you.
So talk about your wife. You got married. How old were you when you were married?
I got married when I was 23 years old. My wife was 20. We met at the grocery store where we were working together, and that's where we met. And at first, my wife did not want to go to church.
Yeah.
She didn't want to go to church. So then we went to church, and she heard Jack Hiles, and the same thing. She heard Brother Hiles, and why does he have to scream so much? Why does he have to scream? Now remember, that was a transition where I was in and out of church. So she was not saved and I was saved, and that's a whole different topic. But God put us together. But she had to she had to come to church. So she came to church, and my dad invited her to church, and she heard Brother Hiles preach, and she just didn't like it. She just couldn't stand it. Brother Hiles is one of the old-time preachers that you just can't forget about him, and just his messages were just one of the best I've ever heard, if not the best I've heard. So she didn't like it. In the second week, she didn't like it. In the third week, and then finally she got saved and baptized. And I told her, honey, this is my life. I love the bus ministry. And at first she was fighting me. She's like, no, let's just drive in. Let's just drive in. And I listened to her for a few weeks. But after that, she's jumped on board, and she's been helping me out all these 23 years, not 24 years.
So you started just riding the bus to church.
Yes.
Just enjoying the ride and being, for nostalgia's sake, or just because it's something you enjoyed. What was it that got you on the other side of it to be a Saturday and Sunday bus worker? Not the one just to get on the bus, but to ride that bus and minister. And what was that transition?
Well, it's the day my bus captain, Luis Ramos, said, hey, come out soul winning with me. He worded it perfectly, where I use it nowadays, but he worded it perfectly. He's like, hey, I'll buy you a candy bar, but go show me your friends. Show me where they live. And he might wanted to invite him to church, but he's like, let me buy you a candy bar, but show me where your friends live. But while we were walking to that door, he was showing me how to win somebody to Christ. While we were walking to that door, he showed me, hey, listen, you stand here and I'll stand here. And when you open the door, you swing that way, he could see both of us. He was teaching me as, we were going at my friend's house, every moment was a teachable moment. He taught me so many things. So he started at like 15, 16 years old, and he started, taking me out. Well, he said to go visit our friends, but really he was teaching me how to go soul winning.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. And I was like, you know what, it's time for me to do this. And I did it for a while, and then I got married, and once I was back with me and my wife, we just did it completely.
Okay, so this predates even being married, and
Yes,
this started as a teenager.
As a teenager, yes.
Wow, okay.
So, so when I drifted away a little bit, like I said, it was a strong conviction. You do it so long, you're like, oh, it's something I want to do and I have to do.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Brother Gonzalez,
Yes, sir.
for sharing your testimony with us. And so we'll have other videos featuring Brother Gonzalez, and we'll continue our conversation about the bus ministry. You can find links to the other videos in the description below. Thank you so much for joining us, and God bless you.